Welcome to the Certitude of the Catholic Faith. I'm John Veneri, and this is a program where we are going through the Catechism of the Catholic Church, primarily Pope St. Pius X's Catechism of, I believe it was 1909, 1911, somewhere in there. Probably the greatest catechism that the Church produced in the 20th century. So we're going through the various parts of the Catechism. Well, I shouldn't say various parts because we're trying to do it systematically. And we've been talking quite a bit on just the first article of the Creed. I believe this is, the fifth program we'll be doing on the first article of the Creed, which is, I believe in God the Father Almighty. And we talked about the fact that many people no longer believe in the Creator God, who made all things out of nothing. Many people no longer believe in the true factual account of Genesis, because a new system is taken over called evolution, particularly materialistic evolution. This idea that man is just a chance product of nature, gradually starting from the simple cell to the fish form, or to the cluster of cells, to the fish form, to the land form, to the monkey form, to the man form. Now, we've been talking about in the previous programs the fact that there is really no fossil evidence for this. And Charles Darwin himself insisted that if his theory is true, the evidence has to be in the fossils. Darwin believed in this theory. He just assumed that in the future there would be this fossil evidence to prove them correct. The fossil evidence does not exist, but the scientific community keeps evolution alive. And we talked about in previous programs that one of the reasons it's kept alive is because many well-meaning scientists are simply trained this way in their university training. Evolution pervades everything, and it pervades all the sciences. It pervades medical sciences and biology and all the various sciences, genetics, everything. It pervades it, and it's a given that evolution is true. But there is a rising tide of honest scientists who are standing up and saying, well, we don't see the evidence, and we believe that we have to go with an alternative explanation of where everything came from. Where did the world come from? Where did the universe come from? Where did we come from? Where did man come from? Where did all the various species come from? We don't believe, based on the evidence, that Darwinian naturalism, gradualism, really answers that. So we want to look at an alternative. We want to look at possibility that maybe we were created by an all-powerful creator who designed us, who designed the universe to work as well as it does. Because you know that you never just find a watch that's working and you come to the conclusion that the watch made itself. Someone had to make it. So there's two ways of dealing with this. One is just taking the straight account of Genesis and accepting it, which sends the scientific community just shrieking into the snowbanks. And then there's the other one that talks about, let's at least admit that this design had to have a designer. And because the design works so well, it was the product of intelligence, so it must be the product of an intelligent design. That's actually a weaker of the two arguments, but it is maybe in the future we'll talk about why that is. I don't want to go there now. But so that even the weakest of these, this just introducing the idea that everything that we see is the product of an intelligent designer is verboten. You may not speak it. The scientists who do so are ridiculed. Some of them are blackballed. Some of them are just, well, a lot of it's ridicule. Saul Alinsky said, never underestimate the power of ridicule. A lot of it is just plain ridicule. Members of the Flat Earth Society, they're stuck in the 19th century, all that business. Some of you may have heard this. Of course, in the United States, this movement for the truth of creation from a creator is very strong. I don't know the status of it in England, in Italy rather. I do know in Poland too, there's a pretty strong movement of scientists, starting with as an example, Professor Gietrich, professor of genetics, who we talked about in previous programs. But then we went on to say that why too is this theory kept alive if there's really no fossil evidence for it, if it's lacking the evidence. And I pointed out that evolution is the foundation of the entire atheistic modern world. I'm not going to go through it all again, but communism is based on evolution, could not survive without it. And I talked about a priest who wrote an article against evolution in communist Lithuania in 1986, and the KGB confiscated it because they knew that communism is based on evolution. You take evolution away, communism collapses because it's sitting on top of it. The entire world of secular humanism, squarely based on evolution. I quoted the Humanist Manifesto, Humanist Manifesto 1, that says that humanists believe that man is part of nature and has emerged as the result of a continuous process. That's evolution. Modern American education is very much based on this materialism, this atheism, this evolutionism. I also quoted Humanist Manifesto 2 in 1974, claiming that science affirms that the human species is an emergence from a natural evolutionary process. Okay, that's evolution. And that this is prevalent, this is the prevalent trend of the times, pointing out also that modern so-called ethics or situation ethics is based on evolution because there is no fixed form of man, and then it follows that there is no fixed form of morality, a definite yes and no. As the term is, a universal, binding, immutable rules of morality don't exist. So morality can change over time. 100 years ago, we figured abortion was bad. Now we say it's okay because the only thing that matters is what a person wants, or to rid themselves of inconvenience. Years ago, we said euthanasia and suicide was bad, but now it's okay in certain circumstances. This is all part of the Humanist Manifesto that call for abortion, that call for birth control, calls for population control, calls for eugenics, calls for suicide. Just kill yourself if you want. It's no problem. Morality changes over time. And I pointed out that our entire modern world, the widespread immorality, abortion, everything I've mentioned, is squarely based on evolution, could not survive without it, which means that if you took evolution away, this entire secularistic, pro-abortion, immoral, modern world would have nothing to stand on. It would all collapse. And this is why I argue that this is the reason it's kept alive. There's too much at stake. There is too much at stake. Humanist Manifesto 3, we didn't get to that. It's just one quote, year 2000. Humans are an integral part of nature, the result of an unguided evolutionary change. Unguided means no designer, no intelligence, no God the Creator. It just happened. We're just here. Humans are an integral part of nature, the result of unguided evolutionary change. Humanists recognize nature as self-existing. Okay, so we talked about that in previous programs. So evolution is necessary for our atheistic modern world, our immoral modern world, where what was right, what was wrong 100 years ago is supposedly right, okay, and could not survive without it. Evolution supplies the non-existent scientific foundation to explain existence without the God of Genesis. And as I said in previous program, if you take away the God of Genesis, you also take away the God of Exodus, who gave us the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt and thou shalt not. Evolution affects not only what we believe, but also the way we behave, because if there is no God to whom I have to answer, if there is no God who is going to either reward or punish me based on how I live, well, then I can pretty much do anything I want. This is one of the reasons why it's very dangerous to deal with atheists, because ultimately they have no ethic. They have no objective ethic. It can change tomorrow. They can say I'm a good person and I'll babysit your children. Well, I don't want you babysitting my children because I really don't know if you have an ethic at all. Evolution, the personal God who, it's very interesting. In the United States, about a couple years ago, there was one of those awful shootings. I think it was at Virginia Tech. It was in a college and somebody came in and just gunned down people, apparently for no reason. And it seemed to be for no reason. He was just malice, really. And man I studied philosophy with, Dr. Raphael Waters, a Thomistic philosopher, he was interviewed within his realm as an ethician, and the interviewer was saying to Dr. Waters, isn't this shocking? Isn't this stunning? Isn't this surprising? And Dr. Waters said, no, 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 it's not shocking. It's not surprising. In fact, he said, I expect more of this in the future. And the show host was stunned. He said, what makes you say that? And Dr. Waters said very simply, because you remove the Ten Commandments from the schools, and then you expect children to live according to the Ten Commandments. It doesn't work. In the United States, you're not allowed to have the Ten Commandments in the schools. You're not allowed to have any, you can't even have a prayer at a school commencement. God is removed. And if God is not there, and an atheist will tell you this, if God is not there, then there is no objective rule of morality that I am bound by, which means I can pretty much do anything I want. And this is the danger of individuals becoming atheists. It's bad for them, but it's also bad for society. And it's very bad when governments become atheistic, because look at what atheistic governments have brought us. Nazism was an atheistic government. Nothing but terror and destruction to the people. Communism, an atheistic government. Terror and destruction to the people. The French Revolution was done in the name of there is no God, or we're going to reject the true God. Terror and destruction amongst the people. So it has some pretty profound consequences, this rise of atheism. And the widespread rise of atheism is based on the theory of evolution. As I said, it's one of the main reasons it's kept alive, keeps the secular order going, the secular worldview going, and woe to any scientist who challenges this dogma, because it has become a dogma. There's an interesting film called Expelled from the United States by Ben Stein, and he's talking about the fact that scientists who will just go so far as admit the possibility of what they call intelligent design, just admit the possibility of it, they can be persecuted, their life can be made very uncomfortable for them. Sometimes, too, they can be drummed out, they will be refused tenure, they will be refused prizes. He interviews some of them. Richard von Sternberg, he holds 2 PhDs in a field of what's called an evolutionary biology. He's basically an evolutionist, this man, and he works at the Smithsonian Institute. I mean, this is prestige, highly prestigious institute of science, Smithsonian Institute. And anyway, he was editor of the journal from the Smithsonian Institute, and he published a peer-reviewed article by a man named Dr. Stephen C. Meyer, and Meyer is in the forefront of what's called the intelligent design theory. And Meyer's paper suggested that intelligent design might be able to explain life on Earth, and that Darwinian naturalism does not even begin to explain the origin of the biological information and its role in the alleged macroevolutionary process, the changes of one species to another. Well, as a result, Dr. von Sternberg's life was made miserable at the Smithsonian. He has a write-up where he talks about what happened, and it was made so unbearable that he was pressured into resigning. Even a U.S. House subcommittee that looked into the matter published a report, and they spoke of this is the term that was used, the institutionalized persecution of Darwin doubters. Remember in the previous program I quoted that scientist who said it's an article of faith? And it's not even the proper definition of the word faith. It's an article of what we just believe. That dogma, I won't say this happens everywhere, but in some places, if you question that dogma, it could be the end of your career. Dr. von Sternberg said that his superiors referred to him, now this is just because he didn't write it himself, he allowed it to be published that someone was saying that everything on Earth might be the product of an intelligent designer. he was accused by his superiors of intellectual terrorism. That's the term they used, intellectual terrorism. Again, you see the emotion taking over. The emotion taking over. There's nothing scientific about that term, emotional terrorism. This is a boilerplate, emotion-based attack, and a personal attack. Another one, Dr. Caroline Crocker, George Mason University. She's a PhD in immunopharmacology. She was a popular teacher in her school, at George Mason University. But in one of her classes, she just mentioned intelligent design in passing. Right after this, she's hauled before her supervisor. She said, I need to see you in my office. And the supervisor said, you must be disciplined. Why must I be disciplined? Because you taught creationism in your class. She says, I didn't teach creationism in the class. I did mention intelligent design in relation to some of the slides I was showing. He said, that doesn't matter. You have to be disciplined. And in the end of the semester, she was fired. Her contract was not renewed. And worse than that, she found herself blackballed. She couldn't get a job after that. She has to go around giving speeches and organizing speeches on her own to make money. And then they criticize her for that. Oh, she's just self-promoting now. No, she was forced into this position. She was fired and blackballed because she touched the forbidden subject. That everything that we see here might be the product of an intelligent designer. Professor Robert J. Marks, he was a tenured professor. Well, he still is tenured, and he thought he was safe, but he still didn't escape the police there because he was interviewed by Ben Stein. Of course, the university, I believe it was Baylor University, learned about it, and afterwards they shut down his research website and they forced him to return grant money. And it was because he was going into the area where they didn't want him to go, once they discovered a link between his work and so-called intelligent design. And he said, you see him on camera, he says, I've been in academe for 30 years. I have never been treated like this. But they all tell the same story. The last one we'll mention is an astronomer named Dr. Guillermo Gonzalez. Now, he is an unabashed promoter of what's called intelligent design theory. And intelligent design, as I said, we'll talk about this in the future, it's the weakest way of arguing, but you can't even argue this way without the scientific world getting upset. He published a book called The Privileged Planet, and he argues that the universe is the product of intelligent design, just the way everything works together, what you would call extrinsic finality. The Iowa University where he was teaching, he wasn't happy about that. And even though, now he was not tenured yet, and even though he had a stellar research record, including the discovery of several planets, he was denied tenure. And he says it was because of the work. It was because of the work that he was doing on intelligent design. It was because of that work. So we see then that this is a real problem. And what this does too is it sends the message to other scientists, that if you want your career to go down in flames, you mention intelligent design, or you start teaching or trying to prove intelligent design, or worse yet, that the God of Genesis actually made everything ex nihilo, from nothing. There is a very strong prejudice because in that film, Ben Stein's film, these are the people I mentioned who were willing to go on camera. There were other scientists who were not willing to go on camera. They said, if I go on camera as someone who studies intelligent design, my career is finished. He did talk to them. You know how it's done. You see somebody in, just shrouded in darkness, and you see the outline of the back of the head or something like that. But they would not dare show their faces because they knew there would be reprisals. Now there are some websites up trying to claim that the people who lost their jobs due to Ben Stein talked about, it wasn't really because of intelligent design. Their contract ran out, or there was this or that or the other. But I have a hard time believing that, because they were told in letters, a number of them were told in letters, this will not be tolerated. This promoting the idea of intelligent design. And just yesterday too, I have to order it and maybe talk about it in a future program. A book that's been out for about 3 years. It's called The Slaughter of the Dissidents. The Slaughter of the Dissidents. And it has a long list of cases and names of scientists who have endured one or more of the various forms of persecution because of their promoting intelligent design. Not all of them, are even what you would call six-day creationists. One of the more notable persons on the list is Raymond Damadian, inventor of the MRI. He invented the MRI, but according to the write-up of the book, I haven't read the book yet, so maybe we'll talk about it a little more in the future, but although he was an eminent scientist, he was refused. He invented the MRI. Now look at all the good that's done for people. He was refused the Nobel Prize because of his so-called creationist beliefs. He was refused the Nobel Prize. So what we see here is this scientific theory taking over. Now, something I'm going to talk about in future programs, and that is the line from Dietrich. Well, I guess it doesn't matter now because it was a couple programs back, but he talks about the fact that Christian philosophies have tried to accommodate evolution. And they try to accommodate it by something called theistic evolution. Theistic meaning God being the worker of evolution. It's the belief that a Catholic can accept evolution provided two things. Number one, you can accept evolution providing that you believe that evolution is not just materialistic and godless, that God used evolution as the mechanism of the creative process. That's part of theistic evolution, number one. Number two is you may believe in evolution of the body, but you may not believe in evolution of the soul. At one point in this evolutionary saga, God picked one lucky ape and breathed the soul into him and named him Adam. Okay, now a number of people accept that a lot. I think many Catholics accept that. I see some big problems with it myself. I do, but that's not something we're going to talk about. What I want to talk about the fact is that when you destroy Genesis and you destroy Adam and Eve, you really destroy everything. Because, think about this, if Adam and Eve did not exist, then there's no such thing as original sin. If there's no such thing as original sin, there's no need to be redeemed from original sin. If there's no such thing as a redeemer, then there's no reason for Christ, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, to come and die on the cross for our sins. And if there's no such thing as the sacrifice of the cross, then there's no such thing as the sacrifice of the Mass. So this innocent theory of evolution and taking away the whole Genesis narrative and the truth of original sin has devastated consequences, and it has had devastating consequences. Countless Catholics have lost their faith because of this, and we don't have to, because the one who saved us from all this confusion was the Blessed Mother herself. Our Lord said that God knows our needs before we know them, and so does Our Lady. She came to our rescue before we knew we were in trouble, and she answered the questions. She gave us the answers, rather, before we were asking questions. Over 170 years ago, November 27th, 1980, Our Lady appeared to St. Catherine Labouré in France. She was standing on a globe, rays were coming from her hand, and around her were the words, "O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee." By reaffirming the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, conceived without sin, she automatically reaffirms the doctrine of original sin and the truth of Adam and Eve. And she said, have a medal struck after this image. And the miracles that were produced by the use of this medal were so great, it was originally called the Medal of the Immaculate Conception. We now know it as the Miraculous Medal. She was reaffirming the Immaculate Conception, and by doing so, she is reaffirming everything else. In 1858, Our Lady made a second visit to France. The Blessed Mother, when she appeared at Lourdes, Bernadette said, "What is your name?" Our Lady said, "I am the the Immaculate Conception. What is that? It's another affirmation of the Immaculate Conception, which means it's another affirmation of the truth of original sin. And she caused a spring to flow with miraculous healing powers. She proved her words by miracles. None of the evolutionists have given us a miracle, but she's given us miracles. Our Lady, her messages are miracles for, even both her messengers, by the way, both her messengers are miracles for our modern day. The body of St. Catherine Labouré and the body of St. Bernadette are still incorrupt. And this is a fact that baffles an honest scientist. See, Our Lady acted as Moses did, and she acted as her divine Son Jesus did. She gives a message, and then she proves her message are from God through prophecy and through authentic miracles. And you'll notice too, 1858, Our Lady reaffirms original sin. A year later, 1859, was the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species, the book that threw into question all of Genesis, threw into question the existence of Adam and Eve, threw into question original sin. And Our Lady came in her own way a year before that with a preemptive strike. They didn't even know it at the time, a preemptive strike against this denial of original sin. And all she had to say is, I am the Immaculate Conception. Our Lady came to Fatima. God wants to establish in the world devotion to the Immaculate Heart. And you can't have an Immaculate Heart without an Immaculate Conception. Our Lady is the only creature who ever walked this earth who we dare to address the title Immaculate Heart. So we see that Our Lady, as a good mother, saved us from the errors of the evolutionists, saved us from those who wish to deny original sin by saying, I am the Immaculate Conception. We'll do more on this topic next time.